Hi, friends. Welcome to Sibyl's Lab of Cartomantics. I'm Amelia,
I'm Danielle.
and this week we are talking about home decks. So, Danielle, tell us what we're going to be doing today.
This is one of our regular Gab videos. So we have that topic of home decks. We have 5 questions that are kind of shape our insights, our opinions about it, and kind of see where the conversation takes us. And along the way, share each of our home decks as we imagine them. So let's get started. Our first question, very simple, direct. What is a home deck? How is it different from a soul deck? Is there only one? How do you know? Let's see what weaves together. So what is a home deck?
Like, soul deck was a phrase that was kind of popular, many years ago, especially in like the tarot YouTube sphere. Yeah, home deck I've heard less, but I have heard it enough to like ask these questions and want to think about it and talk about it. So I think a home deck is like, it's like exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a deck that feels like home. It's a deck that feels like it's not even a comforting deck. It's not like an easy deck either. It's just the deck that you feel comfortable with. The deck that when you pull it out, like there is work to be done with it, but you don't have to stretch yourself too far to read fluently with it. Yeah, I think that's that.
Yeah. When I was thinking about this and settling on my 3 decks, which were pretty easy, they were quick. You could probably guess them, although maybe not. The people who watch our channel could probably guess what these things are going to be. But it occurred to me that I think I'm defining home deck by the decks that I walk into, because I do love a metaphor of understanding tarot as place. And I know the figures. Like I recognize and feel like these are people I've talked to before, the face cards, that I understand the places within that deck kind of intuitively, and not just because they are, triggers to intuition, but we have a rapport. Like I've been here, I know this landscape, and there's no certainly no startup cost if I'm reading with it. Like these decks are, broken in, but it feels like a home language, like a dialect that like I know and have learned. And you're so right. It's not even necessarily a favorite deck. But it is a deck that feels like you're speaking, at least for me, that feels like you're speaking the same language. You're on the same vibe. But soul deck, it was a very attractive term. I remember when I started hearing this term because it felt very important. Like it reflected very high stakes. I think it also gave me a sense of like elevated practice, like I'm doing soul work. I have a special deck for this very serious work that I'm doing. So there was a little bit of ego stroking involved in that for me. And the deck that is probably my number one home deck happens to be the deck that I used to call a soul deck when that was a term that we were more regularly using. But I think that home is more accurate, or it feels more accurate to me, because sure, it feels like it speaks to my soul very fluently. But it feels like home. It feels familiar. Sometimes home is uncomfortable, but like we know each other.
Yeah, I feel like a home deck is a deck that, like, when you close your eyes and picture a certain card, like, you're able to conjure that image from that deck. And maybe it's not every card, like, because that's a lot to hold up there, right? And I can barely remember what I ate for breakfast this morning, but like, it's not hard to at least get like a hazy image of a card in your head from memory. I think a soul deck is like, I think the difference between a home deck and a soul deck is like window dressing. Like, I think they are I think the concept is pretty similar, but I think a soul deck, again, like you said, it has that like, oh, it's a soul deck. Like it has that feeling. And I think that's why there can be some like kind of frenzied feeling around a soul deck. Like you have to like, oh, I have to find my soul deck because it feels important. And a home deck, like oftentimes we kind of walk into our home decks. You know, it's not something, at least for me, it is a thing that happens over time. It's a relationship that is built with a series of images that you use over and over and over again so that they feel like you've got like grooved pathways for them in your brain, you know? And so I think like soul deck has that feeling to me, like it's an outward search for my soul, you know, and home deck is just like the kind of unsexy regular everyday practice that happens with tarot and with a particular deck, you know. And yeah, oftentimes our home decks are ones that aren't even like, they're not the fun ones. They're not the ones that we're like, oh, I'm so excited to get that. Like it's, you know, it's just the one that gets picked up and used a lot.
I would also say that for a home deck, it's a deck that I trust.
Yeah.
Like those images, I have total confidence in what they represent about that particular archetype and my ability to like kind of put together meaning with them laid out on a table. And if I'm struggling with you know, shaping that reading, I feel comfortable in my ability to sit with it and do that and not feel as if there's a problem with the deck or like there's a barrier to understanding. Sometimes a reading should be difficult. It should force us to sit still and stretch, figure out what it is that we're resisting, but I can trust that it's the work in a good way that is sort of pushing me to stretch a little bit. I buried the lead because one of these questions is, can you have more than one? So I said 3, like, can you have more than one?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think I don't even think there's like a specific number. It can be 1, it can be 3, it can be 5. Like it's really, you know, it's one of those things that like home decks are the decks that you have to like see in retrospect are home, you know? And so yes. To answer shortly, yes.
Here's a question that goes with this a little bit. Do you, when you get a deck, like a deck new, and look through the images, do you recognize that it might become a home deck? Like, does it, do you, or is it the sort of thing that you're saying, holy, it's a retrospect thing? Like, gosh, I look back and we got a flow going.
I'm not the right person to ask this question because I am absolutely like a dopamine chaser in that like when I open a new deck, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be a great like we're gonna have a great time together. You know, I mean, not every deck I open feels like it's like, yes, this is gonna be my home, but you know, I'm not a good person to ask that because there are many decks that I open and I go, we're gonna be tight. Like,
this is the can I be your best friend? Like, you know, you're the cool girl. Can I be your best friend?
Versus I mean, yes.
What's actually home? As I was making this list, of course, we have both practiced tarot a long time. We both have several decks in our home libraries or collections. So I think it's reasonable to think it's possible that there are more than 3. So as I was making this, like, what are really the core 3 that these are where home is above everything else? There was a deck or 2 that I wanted to be there that is not there, if I'm telling the truth. But my ideal self would like say that I'm sophisticated and like there is such a depth of practice that I need this kind of deck to be a part of my big three. That's interesting. The idea of the ideal self and the difference. You don't have to tell anyone your home deck. P.S. This can be a relationship. This can be a private relationship. And I would say that it was important. It became a part of my conversation with like my tarot people, my tarot tribe and community. I didn't leap and say like, we're intense. Like me and this deck are going steady. This is a home deck. But anyway, let's get to the next question. What type of work do we do with a home deck? What are these decks?
It's a question because it's how do you know that a deck is a home deck? And I think we kind of answered that. Like, because it's just like, I don't know, it's the deck that like comes to mind when you picture the 10 of Wands or whatever. And I like, here's the thing, to like go back to your question of like when you open a deck for the first time, like, are you like, this is going to be a home deck? Like, yes, sometimes I will have that thought. However, I will say that I can only ever truly say that something is my home after a lot of work.
Oh yeah. Because you don't know if you can trust something or if you're fluent until you've like tested the language, put all kinds of cards next to each other and feel like that you have a flow. As for
like a marriage,
both of us have been in like relationships and marriages for a long time, and it is, but it's not. Do you feel a commitment? Does it feel like once it's a part of like what you would call a home deck, that you feel a certain commitment to continue engaging, to grow with that deck? Or is it just a matter of indifference? Is it a pile of cards? Who cares?
That's a tricky question, and one that I will answer for a later set of questions that
we have. As for the kind of work, we've been percolating on these questions. We've sat with them for a week. I think that if I know something is like tender and emergent, like it is an important, urgent thing, and I am disinclined to be honest with myself about it, it is helpful. Well, you know what I mean? Like, for example, like I have talked frequently about my dog's health struggles on the channel. There can be bad news or challenges associated with that, things that I don't want to kind of own up to. So it would be easy that if a deck gave me any out at all, that I'm going to find it. Maybe it's a reflection of the fact that I don't, there's a reason that people say don't read for yourself if it's really, really important. I don't always trust my objectivity when it comes to reading for myself. And I don't think that we have to judge our lack of objectivity, but I do think it's helpful to have a deck that like I trust isn't going to sting too much, because sometimes a deck is like bringing the pain, but is going to tell the truth, and there's no wiggle room. I feel like my home decks that will share, like, these are not holding me close.
I think I go to home decks most when I am turning to tarot for some kind of stability.
Yes.
Like when I am turning to tarot because everything else feels unpredictable.
That is such a good point. I absolutely love that. Like when we are in a place where our practice is growing and changing, and it's not like it's a bad thing if we're changing our journaling routine, if we suddenly have less time and have to scale back on our practice, if there's anxiety around what that can look like and how it's going to look different, home decks are a place to sit. They're images and archetypes that we can comfortably sit with while we work out the other stuff.
Yeah. And even when just like life generally outside of our practice, when it can get crazy, like home decks are what I tend to turn to for that type of work. Yeah. I think, it's like home decks are the decks, like the type of work, at least for me, that I like to do with home decks is like when I want like a sandwich made by my mom, like that's the decks that I go to.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's not always when I'm in a like tender moment. Sometimes it can just, it's like I'm tired. And it's like, I know I'm going to pull this out because I know I'm going to be able to read with it. It's not going to ask too much of me to be able to work. Yeah.
There's also a kind of, for me, nostalgia. Like I have worked, for example, with one of my decks, Nine of Swords, so many times at different moments that the Nine of Swords, and if you know the tarot, the Nine of Swords is a rough one. So when it's a Nine of Swords moment, like there is stuff to deal with. And I happen to have worked with this Nine of Swords multiple times, and that work has carried me through processing and like exploring that place, that Nine of Swords place. So there is a kind of like emotional echo and memory that exists with my experience of the deck, a kind of like recall in a deep way, like we've done this before. It feels very, I've been in a long marriage, like we know how to move around each other.
Yeah. Do you read for other people with your home decks?
No. Like not on principle. There are a few decks that we're gonna maybe, these decks that I chose as my 3 home decks, I don't think I wouldn't read for other people with them, but I don't know. There is one, actually, I take that back. One of them, yes, I've read for lots of other people with that deck. But the other 2, no. And I don't know that it's because I'm like, like you can't have it. Like it's a coveting thing, like it's just for me. One of them maybe. But the other one, I don't know. I don't know why I haven't read for others with it. Yeah. Do you have a principled stance on this? Because I know some people are very, this deck is my deck and no one else's deck. And I kind of love that, by the way. If you're one of those people and you have decks like that, hold it close, baby.
Well, one of my home decks is difficult to find now. And so for certain types of reading for other people, so like a market as an example, it's not going with me there because I don't want something to happen to it because I can't get it. But no, I mean, frankly, these are the decks that I often reach for to read for other people because they are like, I don't have to do a lot of mental leaps to get to a reading. It's just right there for me. Yeah.
I think in part with the 2 that I haven't used to read for other people, what makes them them feel fluent to me are not readily accessible without that long-term relationship. And reading for other people is often largely like a let's look at this story together. Like let's look at what's laid out on the table. And I don't think that they are as natural or easy to navigate for folks who are coming often with high stakes or sensitive or, challenging questions. So yeah, I suspect that you know which one I'm talking about. I certainly know which deck you're talking about. And I have a backup copy of the deck, and I know you're mad about that. Do these decks change over time, Amelia? Do they stay the same or do they change?
I mean, I don't know because I have to say, like, yeah, yes and no. one of the decks that I brought with me is a deck that I actually thought about for a second, and I was like, I don't know if this is still a home deck. I know it was at some point, but I've kind of fallen off the wagon with it. And I don't know if it still is or not. But then it's like when I think about, like, if I had to grab a bunch of, like, if it was like you're going on a journey, you have no time to think, take 5 decks because that's all you have room for. That's a lot of space, by the way. For as somebody who does backpack, like, that's a lot of space. 5 full decks. Like, it's a deck that I would grab.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. What do you think?
Yes. Like, if I look at my 3 decks, they were 3 very different moments that these decks came into my life. So yeah, absolutely. Because I'm thinking in my mind of 2 decks that were at a time home decks that just aren't. They're decks that I like, that I have a lot of nostalgic connection to. So I like love them for their place in my development as a tarot reader in my early practice, but they're not the decks that I go home to, because it's not just, I could call, I'll share the Llewellyn Tarot, and I've shared the Llewellyn here when we've talked about like our early practice. And the idea of developing practice. If you haven't seen that video, it's a lot of fun. But that deck was very important to my early practice. It's not a deck that I go home to anymore, though. It could be if I needed it to be. I recognize that landscape. It used to be one of the decks that I would carry room to room in my house with me. Because, like, you know, are there any decks like that for you? Like, it's coming with me wherever I go. And if I don't know where it is, I'm stressed. It's not like that anymore, but it is. I will never get rid of that deck, and I always know where it is. It, however, no longer comes room to room. But I considered adding it to this list because it feels like in part where I grew up as a reader. One of my early homes.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think yes, in theory, they do change over time. I don't know if that is the case so far for me.
Is there been a deck like Llewellyn for you that you would 5 years or 10 years ago have said, this is a home deck, and it no longer? Or is the group of 3 that you're sharing like cumulative? So there's nothing that has left the handful of decks?
No, I think the group that I have is pretty cumulative.
I feel very shallow right now.
No, I mean, there were certain decks over. I mean, you have to also remember that, like, for the first however many, I mean, I've been reading tarot for like 15 years. For the first 5 to 7 years, I had like 3 decks in my possession, one of which was missing a card. Like,
Are those decks among your home decks?
no. But
Are
they
they?
never felt like they were among my home decks, even when I had them.
I kind of like that. So if a person is watching this video and they're newer to tarot or have a small, let's say 5 decks total at home, is it possible, like, do you always have a home deck so they're going to have a home within those decks? Or sometimes, like, your home deck hasn't found its home with you yet? Do you know what I mean?
Here's the thing. I think you can, well, and this is a question for later too, that we have on our list, but like in those 5 to 7 years when all I had were 3 decks and none of them felt very much like home, I was still able to read. Like,
Yeah.
I was still able to practice tarot. I was still able to read tarot. It wasn't like it was like tarot is like having a home deck or not having a home deck is not some sort of like gatekeeping situation. But I don't feel like I really got my legs with tarot until after that. Which is also to say, if you're watching this and you are several years into reading tarot and you still feel a little bit lost whenever you lay down the cards, like, it took me 5-7 years before I really felt comfortable reading tarot. And it wasn't buying different decks that did that for me. So that's another thing to know. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like any of those were a home deck for me, personally. So yeah.
Why don't we share? We can continue talking about this too as we share our current 3 home decks and talk a little bit about how they each work for us. And if you're up for it, why don't we share them in chronological order of them becoming home? I'll show, while you show your first one, I'll also show one. Unsurprisingly, this is Tabula Mundi. This deck was always going to be home. And we made a video about just one deck, that tag, just one deck. And this was my, like, it would have been that if it hadn't been this. And I defined my relationship with this in a way that I said it was too airy, that I have reconsidered. So I might, like, this may have been my answer as I've thought more deeply about my connection to this deck and its place as a home. So I'll show images of this while you show images of what deck, Amelia?
I brought the Tarot de St. Croix.
Really?
This is the deck that I had a question about. I didn't know if it would be a home. I have the first edition, which has
those orange borders that people love or hate.
I love them. I love them so much. I've said this before, the current edition doesn't have borders, except for a black, like, title bar at the bottom. I didn't know, because I don't necessarily reach for this deck all the time anymore. Gosh, this was probably one of the first decks that I really branched out with when I started buying, when I realized, oh, I can just get other, they're fun. Okay. And this is around the time when I also really felt like I was getting my legs with tarot and I was kind of understanding how to read it. This and the Laughing Eye, Weeping Eye tarot deck really helped me, like, get my feet under me. I mean, I know there are, like, a couple of cards in this deck where the back has, like, this weird texture because I think of some, like, printing error, and I know exactly which cards those are. Like, that's how much I know this deck. And it's even gotten to the point where the texture on those cards is starting to wear down a little bit because I worked with this so much. And I guess I should start showing cards. But yeah, I asked myself, I was like, is this really a home deck anymore? But you know what this feels like? This feels like the deck that no matter how long I'm away from it, as soon as I pick it up, it does feel like home. It does. It feels like coming home. It feels like, you know, your childhood home that you move out of.
Yeah.
You know, and I know some of us might have harrowed relationships with our place of origin. I also do as well. But there are certain things about that place of origin that, regardless of what happened there, it feels familiar, and it feels familiar in a good way. And that's what this deck is. It's like, I may have moved out of this house and I don't go there very often anymore, but here's one of my textured cards. Love it so much. But it will always feel like home. And I know I can pick this deck up at any time, give it a call. It'll be a good talk. So yeah.
I like that. I'm glad that you explained that kind of metaphor of, like, the childhood home, because I do think that, like, I mediated my relationships with these decks in different ways like that. And this certainly is not a childhood home for me, but this deck, I can trust this deck with anything. I came to this deck because I wanted to learn something about the Thoth tradition, and Aleister Crowley wasn't going to get my money. And I just didn't at that time. I do enjoy and appreciate the traditional Thoth art now, but I didn't like that at the time. So this felt like a way in. to learning, to meeting that esoteric symbolism. So I got it as a learning tool, really. And it just, like, it took whatever I was throwing at it. It feels like an ally. Like, it feels like the straight talker. We did our Council of Seven video ages ago, and I know this was somewhere on the council. I forget where it was, but if it wasn't that kind of peer, straight talking ally friend, it could have been that. It is the friend from home who is like always going to keep it real, and always feels safe, even if it's been ages since you've seen them. So this is the Nine of Swords I was talking about. I worked with this card so much, and I remember this was one of the cards that I was like, oh, me and you, we have work to do, deck, because I remember reading how to read the Nine of Swords in positive light books, like different meanings of the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery and different versions of like how to view that card in light. Nope. This card, no, sir, you're not getting around anything. And I really so embraced the honesty of that. I appreciated how plain speaking it was, and yet how beautiful and symbolic. So
You got this deck like right before the pandemic too, right?
I did. Like probably a year before the pandemic or so. And I remember it was in August. Like, I don't remember what year August, but somewhere around like 2019, whatever. Maybe 2020. But it was the deck that I was going to use for August. At that point, I was like, I'm studying X decks this month, So my study deck for August was this deck, and I just couldn't put it down. Like, we were too busy and like talking too much to each other, and it really carried the weight of some stuff. It also expanded my notion of what I thought tarot could do, like what I could talk about with the cards and the kind of discovery. And I wonder if you feel the same. It's not necessary that a home deck do this, but I do think often it just so happens, or maybe always, it just so happens that your home decks are also the decks that show you that tarot can do a different thing than you thought it could, or that the archetypes work differently than you thought they might, in a way that's actually kind of joyful and exciting. Like, oh, it can do that. I didn't know. Or it talks about that. I didn't know it talked about that. So what is your second deck that came into your life and aha? I take such personal triumph.
This was a gift from Danielle, which actually was the first Christmas that she knew me. So, I mean, at that point, because we met in like February of
2021.
Really? I feel like we've known each other a lot longer than that. Anyway, we met in February of 2021, and she gave this to me. So it was like 11 months. But this is the deck that I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like it was like, it's okay to, because I mean, I've always, and I'm not going to say always, over the years, I really honed in and developed a really like cardomantic fortune telling approach to reading cards. A lot of that came from my work with the Tarot de Marseille. But also I just had I developed this style of reading that was so like cut and dry, and something even like the Tarot de Saint Croix is just, there's like so much and it wants to talk about your feelings, and like this deck will absolutely let me talk about my feelings and hear me out on it. But it I don't know, it felt like a deck that like said, hey, it's okay to read tarot the way that you read tarot. Like, there is a place for your style here too. And yeah, it just, I don't know, it felt like it felt like a deck that was designed for the way that I was already reading, that it just like, it fits so seamlessly in with my work.
I learned what tarot could do differently with that deck. Like I remember working with that deck. It was one of my top 3 decks the year our group was like, what are our 3 decks that we're going to share in December that were our biggest decks the year before? And that was definitely like in the top 3. And it expanded. I always liked fortune telling, but it expanded my idea of fortune telling decks. So I'll share as you continue sharing those images. This is the Our Black Tarot. This is the 2nd edition that's tarot size and a kind of glossy linen finish. This deck, or he's calling it the Black Tarot now, but it used to be the Our Black Tarot. Both of the decks, so your Tarot de Saint Croix is in print still. Tabula Mundi still in print. That is not in print. Sorcery Underground, and that's the one you were talking about before, right? That you wouldn't take to a market these days. This Our Black Tarot edition is in print, though you need to contact him on Instagram. But I got this deck. I didn't know I was purchasing a bootleg copy, and I was like horrified when I found out, especially because I responded so strongly to the images. I felt like a bizarre amount of existential guilt considering how unintended it was. I remember like talking to you and our friends about it. I mean, it was really unreasonable, my reaction to that. But I immediately responded to these images. I remember, do you know when you open a deck of tarot cards and you're like, oh, these are beautiful. We've had responses, or even like, I am having an emotional response. This is so powerful. I remember you responding similarly to the Kazanlar, feeling like the impact. This deck was impactful in a way that was like, I felt it. Do you know what I mean? Like, this 5 of Cups, I felt it in the deepest kind of way. These images, it is not surprising to me at all that this became a home deck, but I didn't like use it with that in mind. I do know there was a point in my practice when I might have been like, oh, I really want this to be my home deck or my soul deck or my home deck or whatever. There are cards that I still don't like. I do not like this Hanged Man. Please, let's reconsider. I love this Death card. I mean, and this too is a deck, Temperance, that I didn't know Temperance could do that. Like this taught me about the archetype of Temperance in a really profound way. So the artist's use of symbols, there's so much buried in these images. It's not an art style that I would have thought that I liked. And it's not even my favorite art style, but it just, I don't know. And I never hear anyone talk about it. It is not an inexpensive deck, so that is probably partially a reason, and it also is probably partially a reason that you have to like reach out to them on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean there are some barriers to getting it. I remember when you got that deck.
There was a pretend store named for the artist on Make Playing Cards, and I was like, wow, this is so pretty, and ordered the deck, and then someone on Facebook told me that it was like and acted like I had done it on purpose, like I had bought a bootleg copy of the deck. I was so horrified that then I contacted the artist. All of these decks, I think, not this 3rd one, but the decks that are closest to my heart, I end up developing a rapport and conversation with the artists and creators of them. So I've corresponded with him multiple times. I corresponded with Mel Moline, the creator of Tabula Mundi. I corresponded with the creator of Sorcery Underground because I love that deck so much. This is not like I am not their friend. I like no more than they like me.
I gotta I don't know.
All right. So what is your 3rd deck?
So my 3rd deck is the Flornoy Noblet. I technically got this after I got Sorcery Underground. However, I had been reading with Tarot de Marseille for many years before that. I think I started reading with Tarot de Marseille in summer of 2017.
Okay.
And I mean, you want to talk about decks that like open you up to what tarot can do or teach you something new that tarot can do. I mean, yeah, learning how to read with Marseille was and continues to be such an eye-opening experience. Prior to getting, I knew I always wanted the Noblet when I first started learning how to read because I loved that. I mean, especially at the time that I was learning, that was the oldest full deck that we had, or almost full deck that, like, you know, was in existence.
How old is that deck, Amelia?
Oh gosh, 1650. That is when this deck, circa 1650.
Ago.
Yeah, roughly 400 years ago. And I liked the idea of like going with the original, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it's the OG. For many years though, like it felt inaccessible to me, so I just worked with what I had. I printed out the free CBD that you could get, and I've shown that deck before.
Why did it feel inaccessible? Was it expensive?
You have to order it from France, and it's another one of those where you have to like kind of go through a process to order it.
It feel more special. That doesn't make it a home deck, but it does feel special.
And so, yeah, I just worked with other Marseille decks that I had. Actually, my first actual deck, Marseille deck that I worked with, my husband bought for me, which is the Climo, the one that has like the really bright colors on it. And he got me a vintage copy, yeah. Which is very sweet of him. He noticed I was working with like a printed out copy of a deck, and so he like did some research and surprised me with that.
Spanish tarot? Is it Spanish tarot? I know what you're talking about.
No, not the Spanish tarot. It's, and I've shown it on here before. It's the one that it like doesn't have any flesh tone.
Yeah.
No, it's not orangey. It has the like primary blue and red and yellow.
Okay.
I think it has green, if I'm remembering correctly, but it doesn't have any of the flesh tones, and the yellow is like yellow.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's the one I worked with for many years. I got this actually I didn't order this from France. I got this at Newt's from Tarot Garden. They had a booth set up there in 2022.
And even there, you had to inquire.
I know, I had to ask. I was like, do you have any Marseille decks? And he pulls out a box. And this is my favorite. This is by far, I have many Marseille decks. This is by far my favorite. If I had to get rid of them all and keep only one, it would be a toss-up between this one and the one my husband bought me for sentimental reasons. But I like, for reading purposes, it would be this one. I love reading with this deck.
Deck 4. What kind of work does that deck do for you?
Everything. There is nothing that I will not do with a Marseille deck. In fact, if I ever have that feeling of I want to do a certain type of work, but I don't know what deck to use, I will pull out a Marseille deck. And I often reach for this one because I love it so much.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, is that set apart for a certain kind of work amongst your Marseille decks?
Do you know? Really, but it's the one I reach for the most often because I love it. I love their faces. I love their faces. I love the colors and the way that they're used. I love like the size of it feels really nice. It's my favorite. And you know, Marseille for me, and then even further this deck, it felt like, I mean, there's no other way to put it. It felt like coming home within tarot. Yes. It was like I finally found my way, you know, and there was a fire waiting for me and a cup of tea. And I felt like I could really finally settle in with reading cards. It is Marseille is a system, and also this deck is like, I can experiment, I can play, I can be my weird self. I can also do really deep inquiry. I can read for the mundane. I can, you know, there are certain things that like the St. Croix can't read for that Marseille and this deck can. I can read for my dishes. I can read for my dogs. I can read for, you know,
Would you take that to a market?
yes. And I have.
There's something, yeah, there is something about decks that are hard to get. This is not a celebration of out of print decks, friends. But if you've worked to get a deck and it feels like it's speaking your language and you're speaking its language, there is something special like to treasure there. I do. I very much remember that purchasing experience. That was so fun. It feels important because you had to like ask the serious tarot people where the serious tarot decks that are so serious that they're not out for sale for everybody are hidden.
Well, and I feel like I waited 5 years. For 5 years, I did the work of learning how to read Marseille, fell in love with the system as a whole, knew I'd wanted this deck for years. Never, I mean, you know, ordering from France is not like that. It's that big of a deal. It's just, it was like, it felt like there were barriers to getting it. And so it felt like I earned my way
No,
in, in some kind of way to like, this was my dream deck and I got it. And like, it was so easy. And I mean, you know, flying to Portland is not.
you feel like you earned it because I remember these are not inexpensive decks. These are investments.
And yeah, and then with a system that I already loved and felt so comfortable in, and then like to flip through this deck for the first time, like it really felt like coming home.
I love that. Yeah. My deck, I can share a little bit about this deck and I'll keep showing pictures as we get into our fifth question, but this is the only one deck that I chose. This is the Babylonian Tarot, unfortunately out of print.
That
and
surprises me.
Really?
I mean, not, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
That's surprising. What did you, well, we can talk more as we get into the fifth question, but this was a no-brainer for me. I use this deck every week for something. This is the newest among the 3 decks. I purchased this when it was actually out of print. I'd seen the art. I was interested. I love mythology, as I've talked about plenty on this channel, doing myth work. So I thought it's reasonable that I thought it might be a good fit for me, but I had no particular expectations. And I have no special relationship before this to Mesopotamian mythology. Like it is an under-discussed mythology among the people, the orbit that I spin around on YouTube. There's lots of Hecate, not very much Eresh Kigal and Nana. So I thought it would be interesting, and curiosity and opportunity to learn. But I got this deck. You know, in a lot of ways, I appreciate tarot first and foremost, certainly impressionably as art, as visual art. You make art. I'm like, you're very good at making art. I'm very good at enjoying art, looking at it and critiquing it, right? I'm a literature professor, like critiquing the beautiful things that other people make, which is like so not to my credit. But visual art really speaks to me, and there are certain artists that like you see their work and it's just a wake up of some kind. And I saw this imagery and just felt a moment of discovery. It helped me see mythology in a different way. And I think what makes this the kind of home this is for me is it feels absolutely timeless. Inanna is the first recorded, I mean, this is a Genesis card, is the first recorded goddess in written history. And I said in the only one deck video, like, this feels like the first of all the goddesses. She is like the first written down, and then all the other ones were written down. So this feels like the beginning of a larger story, and it feels possible to do all the work with this deck. The minors I find to be really practical, actually, but there are so many mythological faces to meet. I've read for other people with this. I used this in a market when I was kind of like in a mood and I wanted to get back in the flow and very much expected it not to go well. And people very much responded to the art. I think there's something about the palette and the images that feel settling, but still, for the Queen of Cups, like there's something really powerful to sit with here. Or the Sun, the god Shamash. So what did you think was going to be my third deck?
I don't know. I mean, I know that's been, to me, that feels like a recent deck for you. Is it pretty recent?
I've had this deck for years. I got it on eBay. I mean, I say that like it's been only 2 years.
I don't know what I would have put there for you. Maybe the Telos Tarot, maybe.
I thought about it, but she can't have 2 decks of my 3. For people who don't know, MM Moline, who made Tabula Mundi, also made Telos. It was a maybe. That's ridiculous. Like, I cannot put 2 of a creator's decks on a list of 3 decks. But, like...
Or even something like the Somnia or something darker. I think I was expecting something darker. You love your dark decks.
I do. You know, Tabula Mundi can go there. And I may wish that my affinity for dark decks made an appearance in the home decks, but it just, you know, like when I'm honest with myself, those are not home. I think maybe part of the reason that this wouldn't have been an obvious choice is for what we're talking about, which is this was not an immediate home deck. If I've had it for 2 years, it took probably a year before I was like, oh, this isn't just a pretty deck that I can do interesting work with. Like, this 7 of Wands is Inanna descending to the underworld where her very angry sister Rushkagal is. Like, I live for this. No, but it took a while to get there and become a home. So it may only be a home deck for, say, 15 months. Look at this, lovers. We can wrap up here, but what a lover's card. What a lover's card. Okay. Do you have to have one?
No.
Well, you were saying that you practiced for a long time with for years and didn't have a home deck. Were you looking for one? Did you feel its absence in retrospect?
I had no concept of what that even meant. I was in such a weird bubble. I hadn't discovered that tarot was talked about on the internet yet. And I thought you just you bought a deck and that was it. Like you had that deck.
I love that.
And
and you realize there are a bunch of people who can't shut up about tarot everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I really had no concept that A, you could have more than one deck, and B, that some have a different place than others. No, I don't think you have to have one to read tarot.
Absolutely. I mean, I think maybe this is untrue, but I don't know that if I didn't have a regular or depth of practice that I would be interested in a home deck. That I would even be awake to the conceptual possibility of it or find it interesting. Because tarot is a tool, in my mind, first and foremost. And if I only engaged with tarot as a tool to use and not as also a place to do other stuff, to study and play and whatever, I don't know that I'd be like I got a home. There's other stuff, other places to find a home. But I exist in the worlds of these decks so much because I spend my work and leisure time with tarot that it makes sense that a home really matters. I don't know. What do you think?
I think for me, when I look back on those early years of reading and practicing and learning and all of that, I think part of the reason nothing ever felt like home is because I was still trying to find my home within the broader realm of tarot. I still felt anxiety around sitting down to read cards because it was still that like I have no idea what I'm doing here sort of feeling. And so nothing was going to feel like home. It was always going to feel, everything was going to feel uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Because I hadn't figured out like tarot in a broader sense at that point. And I had something else to say, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, do you think that you have to become comfortable with tarot first before the difference between one deck and the other really even means anything? Or before, like, you know, something like a home deck is even...
I think that for us and for people who are sitting through like the 50 minutes plus of this video, it is bizarre. I imagine people out there, maybe I'm speaking for you mistakenly, but it's tough to imagine how much tarot is a matter of indifference to most of the people who own decks and use them. So I don't, for the absolute vast majority of people who pick up a tarot deck in a metaphysical shop and think it's interesting, kind of cool. For example, speaking of my little guy here, the vet tech, his neurologist, has been talking to me about tarot, is interested in getting a deck. Maybe tarot would become a big thing to her, or maybe it is an object of curiosity that would become one hobby of many. And I don't, yeah, like I don't have in my mind any expectations around the degree to which a person needs to like.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying other people. I'm saying for you, do you feel like it was a process of having to become comfortable with tarot first?
I think so. I mean, I didn't find Tabula Mundi is really the first deck that I called a soul deck and then really came to calling it a home deck because I stopped taking myself so seriously. I have a soul, but I don't know that, like, whatever. It is, after all, a deck first and foremost in my mind. But it was years that I was reading the cards before I, found that deck. So I don't know that I would have been like attuned to the concept or interested in any way if I hadn't had years of practice and then it turned into more than just like, this is a fun hobby. I'm like, I'm going to do a reading for the office while I watch it. Like, Jim, Pam, what's going to happen? But I don't know. I'd be curious to talk to other people. Hey, people in the comments, tell us, like, if you have a home deck, at what stage in your practice? Because I love the idea of being early in tarot and like the deck is the deck that you know. I imagine that's true for some people who come through the Rider-Waite-Smith and always feel deeply aligned with that tradition and like the art and the story of it. But I am not that person. It took me a long time.
I mean, my like first three decks in order were the Hermetic Tarot, the Paulina Tarot, and the Wooden Tarot. Vastly different.
They are very different.
I wonder why I spent 7 years confused.
Man, why is Paulina Tarot among the first three decks of multiple people I know? It's such a strange thing.
Because it's mass market and it's one of those ones that's so prolific. It's like, I mean, for me, it was the accessibility of it. When I lost that card, it was like a time in life when, I mean, I didn't have Amazon Prime, so I was pay shipping. And that was the deck that was I didn't even know Barnes and Noble had like a tarot section. I was like so unaware of everything at that point. And so I thought I had to go to like a metaphysical store to buy a deck. And so I went to a metaphysical store and they had that. It was like the Rider-Waite-Smith, which I knew I didn't want. The Thoth Tarot, which looked confusing. Mm-hmm. I think they had like a TDM, like the 1JJ Swiss or something like that. The Paulina and like a couple of other, like, I don't know, maybe Tarot Vampires was in there. Like other ones that just were like, ooh, I don't want that, you know? And so the Paulina it was. Because it was
It's
there.
it's pretty, and it feels, I would say for myself, when my mother-in-law said pick one and I picked that one, because I can't blame on her picking this one that I'm like, I can't see the pictures. I absolutely chose that among the 5 decks available in that store. It felt accommodating and it did not feel hostile. It felt like a good place that a beginner could go and feel welcome. I don't know that I've talked about how, like, the first deck I felt really like, ooh, there's magic to cards, that did a lot of heavy lifting and got me excited, was the Enchanted Map Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. I still have that deck. I vividly remember my husband in graduate school considering doing another job and like doing a reading for him with that deck. And the TV was off, the dogs were like in the other room. It was a serious thing. There is nostalgia with that deck, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a fun journey to come to tarot, feeling like tarot matters enough to like discern languages and dialects, and then feeling like you can find a home, like a place that's comfortable. Because the one of our parts of this question was what need does it meet? And it just feels like home.
It feels like a landing place.
Yeah, and in an uncertain world, or in a like, it's a place to rest and still do thinking, but feel pleasure in the discovery. I don't know how often I just look at the pictures.
Well, and my hope is that, I mean, so I feel this way about teaching theater. I want to teach the world theater because I think everybody could benefit from it. I think everybody can find something from it. Even to me, teaching theater has always been process-based, not product-based. So I've always been like, everybody can learn something from this as an experience. And I feel very similarly about tarot. Like, I want the world to know tarot and read tarot because I think it can be just so helpful and so beneficial. And you don't have to do it a certain kind of way. Like, there is a way for everybody to feel comfortable within this space. And I think that's my hope, is that, like, regardless of deck aside, my hope is that everybody who comes to tarot and wants to be welcomed in the space of tarot, that they find that in some way. They find some landing place, some home, some comfortable spot within just tarot as a whole, regardless of the deck that you have in your hand, that it feels welcoming and it feels like home.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think part of discovering, like, there is something accommodating in, like, that tarot accommodates sort of the broad spectrum of interests and curiosities, is learning and getting excited about all of the things it can do. Like, using it in the literature classroom, I don't know why I suddenly decided, like, why not see? I think it's because I just enjoyed tarot, and I'm like, how can I bring this thing that I think is fun into work? And I didn't really know it could do that truly until, like, I coerced students into buying a thing I told them they had to buy. And then we had really a lot of fun understanding stories that are sometimes difficult to understand using the cards. Like, they can do so many things. They're pictures on paper, and hopefully beautiful pictures that speak to us. The last part of this question before we shift to our collective reading and our wrap up is, do you have any guilt or anxiety or stuff connected to not touching your home decks in a long time? So, when it's been like a year, how often do you touch them? Do you have to read with them often for them to stay home decks? Or is it like sometimes they're out of sight for months at a time?
I mean, sometimes they're out of sight and then they aren't, and then they are again. Like, I have no regimentation or routine around it. It's just whenever I want to.
I do align with some people. I've heard some people talk about feeling guilty about not using their decks and not using their home decks or their soul decks or whatever. When it's been a long time since I've touched the Art Black Tarot, it feels like a deck full of people that I know and who tell me stories and who I tell stories to and whatever. Sometimes I do feel like, gosh, I let this tool languish, like this beautiful thing that can do so much. So I will occasionally feel a little bit of like, man, I have taken for granted like this powerful thing that, like, especially when it was out of print still, like, that's really hard to get. And I need to remind myself like this thing that it can do. So it's not so much I owe someone an apology, but a kind of like, don't take for granted this tool. But yeah, it was just, we thought it would be fun to kind of acknowledge that sometimes there's swirling anxiety around, like, talk about these intensive connections with decks, about feeling like we've neglected that intense connection, or is there any anxiety about that or whatever. But let's wrap up with our collective question. I'm going to use my number one home deck, Tabula Mundi. What deck are you going to be using?
I pulled out the St. Croix.
That was your number one, right?
I don't know. First, it was the first one that I got.
Chronological, like the chronological number one.
Yeah.
So our chronological number ones. Our question for the collective, as we like to wrap up with on this channel, is that this week, how can we find our home within any tarot deck that happens to be in our hands? So forget whether it is like your home deck and you really have one and that's what's in your hands, or it is the brand new deck that you just got, or a deck that you're still trying to learn. How can we find home within whatever deck happens to be in your hands? And we'll each draw one card and see how they speak to each other. There's something, man, about the actual tactile experience in home deck that you've shuffled hundreds of times. And
this damn card. I have had this deck.
King of Wands.
Yes, King of Wands for so many years. And it's like, it never fails that this card is going to come up at some point.
Okay.
He follows me around. So this is Hermes Trismegistus, if I'm saying that.
Trismegistus.
Yes. So he's an alchemist and a magician. And then we have the Three of Cups.
The Three of Cups, Lord of Abundance. And that is Mercury in Cancer, Mercury being the planet assigned to the magician. And a lot of decks illustrate the magician using Hermes as the magician being depicted. So we have a magician, the master and wielder, I love that image, of fire next to an ill-dignified element, water, abundance, flowing, beautiful.
I feel like there's something about making magic with what you have. And part of that magic is in like having a like acknowledging the abundance of tarot, of whatever it is that you have in your hand, and making some magic with that.
I like that. And I look at this and think of these three hands, that it's one of them is you, one of them is the deck, and one of them is something outside of you. Like it actually feels to me like part of occupying that space of master is like inviting yourself to put your deck through its paces and see what it feels like to stand in home and read for something else. Whether it's like, I just keep talking about Jim and Pam. I know what happens, people. I watch all of The Office, but the drama is real. Or going on Reddit relationships, or like whatever, reading for like the royal marriage or whatever silliness that you're reading about. looking out and standing in like the home offered by the deck that you have in hand, and being the wielder, magician, wielding the cards to see what abundant answers they offer.
I
So,
mean, if you think about it, like, I mean, some people call tarot a book. It's 78 cards of a multitude of possibilities. And that's cool. Like, that's really cool. It doesn't matter what deck you have in your hand. That's cool. Um, there's like, I remember somebody describing who's an artist who got into tarot, and kind of feeling like, I remember watching a video of hers where it was almost this like defensiveness of like, this is why like tarot, don't come at me.
yeah.
But she was like, first and foremost, I'm an artist. And can you imagine, for $40, I can buy 78 pieces of art.
Yes. Absolutely.
And
Pretty pictures.
and just hold them in my hands and look at them whenever I want to. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, even if that's it, if that's tarot to you, like that is so cool and powerful and magical. And I mean, it gets me fizzy.
I absolutely agree with you. I love that. I love that. And a home deck can be a deck that is just that for you. Like if it is a deck that you spend like time absorbed in the beauty of the images and you never shuffle it, but it is where you find a certain kind of home. Like I just love that. I feel like a child that I'm like, ooh, pretty pictures. So many pretty pictures. And they're inexpensive. 100% agree. All right, take us home, Amelia. How are we wrapping up today?
All right. Well, we are so glad that you joined us for this conversation. We would love to know any of your thoughts around this topic. Like, do you even believe in home decks? Is that something that had ever occurred to you? Do you think we're just full of it? We'd love to hear all of your thoughts about this.
Is there any disagreement? I want to know people's home decks, actually.
Yeah,
So
actually, and tell us your home deck if you feel like you have one.
Or three.
However many. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have all of the information below. You can see all the decks that we talked about, as well as where to find us, where you can book a reading or a mentorship, and keep your eye on the horizon. We've got some new fun things coming to our website, which of course we'll make an announcement about. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. And until next time, friends, we will see you in the lab.
Bye.